image like no other, inspiring decades of research and debate. The Shroud of Turin, that's a piece of history, and it has an ongoing puzzle for science.
The Shroud of Turin is a burial cloth that's imprinted with what many believe is the actual image of Jesus after his crucifixion. Now, it's been debated for years, but the shroud is back in the headlines in a major way.
Hidden deep within the ancient linen fibers of the Turin Shroud, scientists uncovered something extraordinary: DNA. But when this genetic material was examined, the research team was left in stunned silence. For millions of believers around the world, the shroud is the burial cloth of Jesus Christ, the lone physical remnant of the resurrection, a mute witness, a fifth gospel written not with ink but with blood. Before we go further, we humbly ask for your support. A like and a subscription help this message reach others, and we are truly grateful. To skeptics, however, the shroud tells a very different story. They argue it is the most elaborate and convincing medieval forgery ever produced. Some even suggest Leonardo da Vinci was behind it. Others believe it was crafted by an unknown genius designed to deceive pilgrims desperate for miracles. For more than 6 centuries, this debate has raged on, faith on one side, reason on the other, neither willing to yield. But the 21st century changed everything. The age of pure speculation gave way to science, cold, exacting, and unforgiving. Genetics, high-energy physics, spectroscopy, and forensic analysis entered the conversation. What once seemed impossible became achievable. Researchers stopped treating the shroud as a secret symbol and began examining it like a crime scene, evidence in an unresolved case, a biological archive silently preserving 2,000 years of history. They extracted and sequenced DNA embedded in the fibers. Every thread was scanned with X-rays. Bloodstains were broken down into molecules, atoms, and elemental signatures. They expected simple answers, perhaps traces of one individual or remnants of medieval pigments. What they found instead defied every expectation. Geneticists at the University of Padua and physicists working inside sealed ENEA laboratories uncovered data that shook even the most seasoned scientists. The results didn't merely challenge existing theories, they obliterated them. Both skeptical explanations and traditional assumptions collapsed under the weight of the evidence. The shroud was no longer just cloth, it became a map tracing a journey that began 2 millennia ago. A record of suffering so exact it cannot be replicated, and evidence of a sudden, intense burst of energy, one that modern physics still cannot explain. This marked the start of the most comprehensive forensic investigation ever undertaken. We will follow clues invisible to the naked eye: microscopic pollen grains, molecular residues, biological signatures. Step by step, we will uncover whose blood truly soaked these fibers and why it seems to cry out in the silent language of biochemistry. We will explore the physics of the image itself, an image that behaves simultaneously as a photographic negative, a hologram, and an X-ray. We will also confront a question that stunned the scientific world: why DNA analysis forced researchers to admit this artifact could not have originated in Europe, and why it bears witness to events that altered human history. To grasp the shock of modern genetic discoveries, we must return to the dawn of scientific shroud research, modern syndenology, to the moment humanity first truly saw the face hidden in the linen. That moment arrived on May 28, 1898, in Turin. A lawyer, city councilor, and passionate amateur photographer named Secondo Pia was granted rare permission by King Umberto I to photograph the relic during its public exhibition celebrating the prince's wedding. Photography at the time was arduous and unforgiving. Pia hauled a suitcase-sized camera onto tall scaffolding inside the cathedral, using powerful magnesium flashes to pierce the darkness. He exposed 2 large glass plates, each measuring 50 by 60 centimeters. Late that night, alone in his darkroom and illuminated only by a red lantern, Pia lowered one plate into the developing bath. Then it happened. As the image slowly emerged, Pia nearly dropped the priceless negative in shock. On the photographic negative, where light should turn dark and dark should turn light, there appeared not a faint stain, but a sharp, high-contrast, astonishingly detailed positive image. A face, deep-set eyes, a broken nose, a mustache and forked beard, bruising on the right cheek. For the first time, the figure in the linen was no longer a shadow. It was a man. The face carried a calm, commanding majesty, yet unmistakably belonged to someone who had endured unimaginable suffering. This was not merely surprising, it was revolutionary. Any normal drawing or painting behaves predictably when reversed into a negative. The result is distorted and unnatural. But the shroud was different. Its negative looked like a true black and white photograph of a real human being. That single fact changed everything, and it remains impossible to dismiss. What we see with the naked eye is not a normal image. It is already a negative, and that raises an impossible question. Who in the Middle Ages understood photographic principles? Who could create a perfect negative image without any way to preview or verify it? Photography would not exist for another 8 centuries. The human brain cannot perceive the world in negative, let alone reproduce it with such precision. This was the first true crack in the wall of skepticism. The shroud did not behave like art. It behaved like a photographic plate, capturing a single moment in time. Over the decades, the cloth was examined with X-rays, ultraviolet light, infrared imaging, and laser scanning. Yet the greatest secret was not in the image itself. It was in the dust, microscopic particles trapped between the linen fibers during centuries of handling and travel. In 2015, a team of geneticists led by Professor Gianni Barcaccia of the University of Padua was granted unprecedented access to the shroud. Their goal was not to find the DNA of God, science has no reference for that, but to reconstruct the history of the cloth itself, where it had been and who had touched it. Using sterile micro-vacuum devices with ultra-fine filters, they collected dust, pollen, and organic material from deep between the threads, places where ancient traces can remain sealed for millennia. They also analyzed particles preserved from the 1988 restoration. Working in ultra-clean laboratories, the team employed next-generation sequencing, focusing on mitochondrial DNA. Unlike nuclear DNA, mitochondrial DNA exists in hundreds of copies per cell and survives far longer, making it ideal for ancient samples and geographic tracing. For weeks, computers decoded millions of sequences, comparing them with global genetic databases. When the final maps appeared, the scientists realized they were looking at something unprecedented. This was not the DNA of one person. It was a genetic portrait of humanity. Published in Nature's Scientific Reports, the findings sent shockwaves through the scientific world. If the shroud were a medieval forgery from France, European DNA should dominate. If it were an untouched relic from Jerusalem, Middle Eastern markers should prevail. Neither was true. Instead, the cloth carried genetic traces from across Eurasia and Africa, Middle Eastern haplogroups linked to ancient communities, European markers from centuries of veneration, African lineages tied to early Christianity, South Asian signatures, and even East Asian DNA associated with China. China, India, Africa, Europe, the Middle East, all written into a single piece of cloth. This led to a stunning realization. The shroud is not merely a burial cloth, it is a traveler. When researchers mapped the genetic data, it aligned with an ancient route long dismissed as legend, the journey of the Mandalian. According to early sources, the shroud was folded so only the face was visible and traveled from Jerusalem to Edessa, a Silk Road crossroads where pilgrims and merchants from across the world encountered it. From Edessa, it moved to Constantinople, then vanished during the Fourth Crusade, resurfacing later in Greece and finally France. With each stop, microscopic traces accumulated, layer upon layer, recording humanity's encounter with the face in the cloth. No medieval forger could have orchestrated this. Pollen analysis confirmed it. Botanists identified 58 plant species on the shroud, many native to the Middle East, and some found only between Jerusalem and Jericho. One plant dominated the samples, Gundelia terniforti, a thorny desert shrub consistent with the crown of thorns described in the Gospels. It blooms during Passover. The pollen spoke. Blood analysis followed. Using electron microscopy and Raman spectroscopy, scientists confirmed the stains were real human blood, type AB, containing markers of extreme trauma, creatinine, ferritin, and elevated bilirubin. This was the blood of a man brutally tortured, dehydrated, and beaten beyond endurance. No artist could fake that. Radiocarbon dating from 1988 once seemed decisive, but later analysis revealed the sample came from a repaired, contaminated edge woven with medieval cotton. The test dated the patch, not the shroud. In 2022, a new method called wide-angle X-ray scattering measured the aging of the linen's cellulose at the atomic level. The results aligned not with medieval fabric, but with 1st century linen from Masada, dated to 50 to 74 AD. Science had come full circle. Yet one mystery remains. How did the image form? No paint, no pigment. The image exists only on the outermost fibers, formed by oxidation and dehydration, consistent with a brief, intense burst of energy. A moment frozen in time. The shroud contains a perfect 3D image, forensic accuracy, coins from Pontius Pilate's reign, pollen from Jerusalem, and blood bearing the chemistry of crucifixion. Layer by layer, discipline by discipline, the evidence points to Jerusalem, 30 to 33 AD. Returned to its vault, the shroud remains silent, but the data speaks. Perhaps one day science will fully explain the mechanism. Until then, the Turin Shroud stands as a fifth gospel, a witness not only of faith, but of history itself. Do you believe science will ever explain a miracle, or are some mysteries meant to remain open to both the mind and the heart?